Yep. Right, potentially explosive news coming from Royal Enfield, which is going to be announced on Friday the 1st of September this year, just a couple of days away now, for all Royal Enfield aficionados. I became aware of this on last Friday, and I've been bubbling about it ever since. Now, there's a lot to unpack in this video, so I'm going to start from the beginning, which seems like a logical place to start, just to help some people put into perspective what we think is about to happen. The Royal Enfield Bullet is possibly one of the most famous motorcycle models in the world. It's been in continuous production since 1932, which also makes it the oldest model of motorcycle in the world. 91 years. And no other motorcycle manufacturer can come anywhere near that record. Now, I think I need to give some sort of perspective or clarification on the difference between the current Bullet models and the classic models. Many people consider these to be completely different motorcycle models, but really they're one and the same. In 1954, the original Enfield India opened its doors and started producing motorcycles. These were the 1954 version of the Royal Enfield Bullet, the latest iteration in what was actually the 1949 model. Now, this is the version that we've all come to know and love over the years. Twin-seat, sort of modern configuration of motorcycles that we're all used to. This had been Royal Enfield's main production focus between 1954 and the sort of early 1990s. Now, in the 1990s, they brought out the deluxe version, which was basically a chrome version of the same motorcycle, and this slowly developed into the classic. Basically the same motorcycle, but adapted and restyled into a model that took inspiration from the pre-1949 models. And a very good job they made of it too. Now, both models have been produced sort of side by side for about the last 20 years in a 350 and a 500cc variant. And then in 2020, the 500cc version was dropped. Now, the 2010 version of the 350 Bullet is still available in India, and I have mooted in the past that the only reason they've retained it in the range, I've got no idea what the sales have been like, is to maintain model continuation, because obviously a couple of years ago they released the 350 Classic on the new J platform. All new engine and chassis, a complete new bike from top to bottom. But it was a classic, not technically a Bullet, hence the fact that they've continued producing the old 350 Bullet. Now, we know that Royal Enfield have a lot of new models planned, but a major spanner in the works was the pandemic, which obviously was a huge obstacle in the development of new models and getting them to production. This has had a knock-on effect, which means Royal Enfield have just been sort of trickling out the odd new model, a couple of new models a year. And I believe what has happened is that they have now caught up, just in time for the 70-year anniversary of the Royal Enfield India brand. And what better way is there to celebrate that 70-year milestone than introducing a complete new Bullet range? Now, on Friday, on the main page of Royal Enfield India's website, a scrolling countdown commenced, showing some of the famous Royal Enfield Bullet emblems of days gone by. That countdown ends on Friday the 1st, where we're going to find out what is actually going on. And what I believe is going on is a complete new range of bullets starting from the 350, including a new 500 single, and terminating in a new 650cc twin version of the Bullet. Now, first of all, I just want to tackle the E model and the Electra. It's been mooted that these may be electric motorcycles, but I was talking with Mark Wells 18 months ago personally. Mark Wells, of course, being Royal Enfield's chief engineer. I quizzed him about Royal Enfield e-bikes, and Although he was quite open about the fact that they are sort of developing e-bikes, we know that because we've seen certain press releases over recent months. He made it quite clear to me that they were several years away from actually releasing anything. Which makes sense. I mean, obviously it's sensible to get your foot under the table with an electric bike, but it doesn't make any sense to release an electric bike until legislation says you actually have to. So, as it stands, if this is a complete new release of a line of new Bullet models, the E version and the Electra are a bit of a fly in the ointment. It could just be that they're paying homage to past models, but they're only going to be releasing one motorcycle. I hope that's not going to be the case. Now, the Electra, I believe, was their first sort of all-electric start Bullet, which I know was available in the early 1990s. And since all Royal Enfield motorcycles are now electric start, I'm not really sure where that would fit in within a range. The E model Bullet is probably just a trim level. I mean, we know that they have the ES version of the 350 still in production. So it may be something along those lines. We're going to see a standard 350 Bullet and a 350 Bullet E, which maybe stands for executive models, something like that. We know that what they're possibly doing here is taking old names and adapting them to a new model. So until we know for certain what's going on, I have to assume that that's possibly what they're doing here. I mean, I do enjoy these sort of teasers, you know, the way Royal Enfield sort of gradually teases out new models to the public, but it's infuriating at the same time. Especially when the subject is an iconic model like the Bullet. Now, I've done a bit of research since sort of discovering this countdown, and I've read a few motorcycle magazine articles, also sort of briefly mooting what might be going on. Everyone seems to believe that it is a complete new range of motorcycles, although some of the conclusions that they've come to I found a little bit surprising. There was an Indian publication that suggested that the J platform series of motorcycles, the Classic 350, the Hunter 350 and the Meteor 350 is on its way out, is going to be discontinued. We're referred to as outgoing models rather than existing models. I don't believe for a moment that's going to happen. As I've said in several videos over the last year or so, I believe the J platform is the start of something. It's not a standalone range. These three models have all been very successful motorcycles in their own right. They're still babies. They've only been around for at the most 3 years, and Royal Enfield is a very pragmatic company. You don't fix what ain't broke, and these models definitely ain't broke. Now, over the past few months, a few photographs or spy photographs have been brought to my attention of bench-seated Royal Enfield Bullets being tested on the streets in India. Bearing in mind the history of the Classic and the Bullet, it's not going to take an awful lot of transformation to turn the J platform into a 350 Bullet. The J platform has been designed as an all-purpose platform for several models, not just the three models that already exist. And Royal Enfield is just going through a strategic deployment of different models based on this platform. So the new 350 Bullet is just going to be a mid-1950s-esque version of the Classic, as per the original models from this company. Now, as for the Bullet 500, a few of these publications have said, you know, this one's a bit of a mystery because they expect it to be a single cylinder 500, but no one's seen anyone testing a single cylinder 500cc Bullet. Now, as I said in a previous video on this subject, the J platform engine has in all probability been designed to be produced as a 350 and 500cc single. That's exactly what Royal Enfield did with the last generation of 350s and 500s, and it's a practice that just about every motorcycle manufacturer follows. So they may well have been testing a 500cc version on the streets of India in full sight, and everyone will have just thought it was a 350. There's no mystery to that one. Mechanically, obviously, there are going to be some differences in order to achieve the larger capacity, but externally, the engines will look exactly the same. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever for Royal Enfield to develop a completely new 500cc single. As I said in a previous video, this J-platform single-cylinder engine was almost certainly designed with an architecture to provide a 350 and a 500cc variant. And again, as I've commented in the past, the twin-loop chassis for the 350 is far stronger than it needs to be for 20 brake horsepower. So in theory, minimal alterations would have to be made in order for it to be able to cope with a more powerful 500cc single cylinder engine. And I am hoping and praying that that's what we're about to see. This obviously would then lay the path open for a 500 Classic as well, at some stage in the not too distant future. Now, still on the subject of the 500, there is another possibility, but I think it's an unlikely one. Way back in the distant past, back in the Redditch days actually, and I can't remember when it was released, it's not widely known model, Royal Enfield did produce a 500cc twin version of the Bullet. Obviously, this is not something that the Indian Royal Enfield factory is known for, but in recent years there have been sort of drawing on the distant past of the mark. So there's a possibility we might see a sleeved down version 500cc twin derived from the already present and well proven 650 twin engine. As I've said, I think it's unlikely, but it is a possibility. After all, you know, I don't live in the Royal Enfield designs team head, so you know, it all depends which way forward they've decided to go. What is for certain, the Royal Enfield 500 Bullet and Classic has been missed by customers, and it's got to come back at some stage. The 350 version was always king in the Indian market, so you know it makes sense that they've sort of moved forward with the 350 singles first. But Royal Enfield is an international company now, and you know, the Western world hankers after a 500. I suppose we'll find out one way or the other on Friday. Right, last but not least in this mooted lineup of new Bullet models, the Bullet 65. Now, I've got scant knowledge on the old Bullet 65. I think it had something to do with its top speed and the number of gears that it had. Feel free to correct me on that one if I'm wrong. But it doesn't take an awful lot of imagination to reimagine that name to fit a new 650 twin version, which we have seen being tested from various spy shots on the Indian roads over the last few months. The name 65 being adapted to mean 650. Or at least that's how it appeals to me. We know this bike exists, we've seen it. A new model styled as a Bullet based loosely on the Super Meteor using the 650cc air-cooled twin motor. As I've already said, Royal Enfield historically did have a twin-cylinder Bullet, so it does fit very genuinely and comfortably into the Royal Enfield Bullet family tree. Unless we've been grossly misled by Royal Enfield jiggery-pokery on their test mules, this bike is fact and not fiction, and it would be nice to see it released in this lineup. Now, what I'm going to do, I'll leave a link in the video description for, you know, this countdown on RoyalEnfield.com's webpage. But one of the biggest takeaways from this little launch event for me is if they are bringing in a new 500cc motor, that is huge. Whether it's a sleeved down 650 twin or a bored out 350 single, this is major news as far as I'm concerned. As I've said, the 350 single has always been king of the road. in the Indian market, and the Indian market is Royal Enfield's bread and butter, if you like. So they've seen to their own customers first. But, you know, here in the UK, in the States, in Australia, New Zealand, and all over continental Europe, the 500 was the bike that we preferred. Now, if what we think is about to happen is actually going to happen, and we see this new 500cc variant, and while I've been making this video, it's just sort of clicked why Triumph have rushed that 400cc baby Bonneville launch. Because if they'd waited any longer and this Royal Enfield announcement was announced, they wouldn't have got a look in, they wouldn't have gained anywhere near the traction in the market that they have. We already know that the 350cc variant of the J platform is under stressed, and it's basically an engine governed by the ECU to just go so far and no further. A newly introduced 500cc version of this motor with considerably more power isn't necessarily going to be restricted to the new Bullet and possibly a new Classic 500. It opens the doors to a sort of middle version of the 350 Meteor and, of course, the Hunter. Okay, I might be getting a bit ahead of myself here, but if what we think is going to happen happens on Friday, we could conceivably in the future see a 350 Meteor, a 500 Meteor single or possibly a twin, and of course the 650 Super Meteor that we already have. Now, where the Hunter is concerned, obviously we already have the 650 Continental GT and the Interceptor, so there would be no need for Royal Enfield to go down the route of a Hunter 650. But a Hunter 500 in either single or twin cylinder guise is going to be a major player. It would be relatively easy for Royal Enfield to introduce a 500 single to the existing Hunter architecture. And although we know that Royal Enfield is the adult in the room where motorcycle manufacturer is concerned, and they're not necessarily likely to start chasing performance figures, a long stroke 500cc motor in most ways is going to run rings around a short stroke 400cc motor. And certainly to us Westerners, you know, given the choice between the two, I think most would gravitate towards a long stroke 500 single. Because we all rode short stroke low capacity bikes back in the 1970s and 80s, and we know what they're like. These really are exciting times. Either way, as I said, we've got the Royal Enfield India 70th anniversary coming up next year, and it does make sense to me that this upcoming release is probably something very special. You know, Royal Enfield are obviously going to pull all the stops out, and it seems, at least on face value, that this is going to be a huge release of several models. And not just any model, we're talking about the Bullet here, the most iconic motorcycle on earth. Rest assured, if you miss it, I'll let you know what's happening in next week's video. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you would leave a like for this video if you enjoyed it, or even if you didn't, and also subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. These things manipulate the algorithm and help this channel move forward. Now, if you want to help this channel out in other ways, there is always my Patreon page, which is there's a link to it in the video description down below, or you can thank me via the super thanks button if you so wish. Either way, I'll continue pumping out this sort of content for as long as I possibly can. I am, of course, going to be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.